Hi, family. My name is Quanisha Johnson, and I am a licensed counselor and educator. And today I am very excited to join you and for you to join me actually for session 3. And we have a 4-part virtual series this month. And our theme for February is the dynamics and challenges of parenting and families. And just recap the first 2 sessions before I introduce session number 3. Our session 1 was understanding and overcoming the impact of intergenerational patterns. Our session 2, essential steps to resolve family conflict. And today, the Pact, steps to positive co-parenting. So we're on session 3 of our theme 1, the dynamics and challenges of parenting and families. So today we're going to talk all about being co-parents. Okay, so let's get the party started. Okay, so let's start our discussion. The Pact, steps to positive co-parenting. So we're going to do some definitions. That's what, I traditionally do, just define things and give it some context. So we're calling this the Pact. So what is a pact? A pact is an agreement, a covenant, or a compact between two or more. So I thought that the pact was very fitting for our conversation today in regards to two people coming together in agreement on this journey of parenting, right? Coming together to an agreement about this journey. Parenting is challenging, and so being able to agree on moving forward and raising children, even when they're not together. So then we have the word positive. So we don't just want a pact, right? An agreement. We don't just want co-parenting. We want that co-parenting to be positive. So we know that positive is an adjective to describe something, right? So indicates or it relates to or characterized by, I love these words, affirmation, addition, and inclusion. Those are great terms when we think about co-parenting. We want to affirm, right? Because I think about affirming our children. I think about adding to their lives. I think about inclusiveness. I think about including all those involved are their village, involving their village in their well-being, right? Adding to, including, not taking away, or presence rather than. So this is when we these are the things that we don't want to do. So when we're trying to positively come together, right, in this journey of co-parenting, we want to do the affirmation, the addition, the inclusion rather than the negation, the withholding, or the absence. We don't want to take anything away. So even though we may have a certain type of relationship with someone and we're struggling, we have to make sure that we're not withholding, we're not negating, and we're not that strain or that relationship dynamic does not cause any of us to be absent. So I love this word positive. We can't talk about co-parenting, just say co-parent without saying it has to be done in a positive way. Lastly, contributing toward or characterized by increase or progression. So when we're positive, I love this. So positivity, I think of increase. I think of progression. And so that makes me go right back to talking about children. And so when we're having positive interactions, when we're positive with our children, we can see an increase in their lives. We can see them progressing. That's very important. So when there's positivity, there's increase, there's progression, things grow. So now let's look at co-parenting. And what is co-parenting? We're talking about that today. So co-parenting is the coordination of child rearing responsibilities between two adults. So I'm going to give you some examples of child rearing responsibilities. And this is not an all-inclusive list. These are examples, right? One, providing a safe environment. That environment that we want to be safe has to be so not just physically, but emotionally as well. We want to create an environment where our children can express themselves, have a positive voice, not live in fear. So we're providing a physical, right, environment that's safe, and an emotional. So we're coordinating with, as co-parents on those things. Of course, very importantly, we want to be able to figure out how do we collectively come together and provide, our child's basic needs. And that's food, that's shelter, water, clothing, medical care as needed, right? Going to the dentist, the orthodontist, the doctor, whatever is needed medically, right? That we're coordinating with our co-parent to be able to figure out what is best under that category. Then we're wanting to provide both parents love, encouragement. It's so important. We want to teach discipline. We want to teach morals, to teach values, right? We want to make sure that we're doing that. We're providing for their educational needs and providing support for that. So even though we are not living together and we're not together, we want to do what's best for our children. So we want to make sure education's there, right? We want to provide that support together. We also want to, as co-parents, we want to teach our children responsibility and the tools needed to be independent. Because even though parenting, looks different in every home, right? There's some similarities that we share, in terms of no matter what your ethnicity is, your race, your nationality, you may have similarities, right? Culture, there's similarities in cultures, but ultimately, right, and there's differences, but ultimately, no matter what the differences are, similarities are, we're all wanting to raise our children to be independent, to be on their own, to be able to be self-sufficient. If they have needs, if they, to figure out what shelter they need, what their emotional needs are, how to take care of themselves. So we're grooming and raising and teaching so that they could be productive on their own one day. So we see in many African American families, co-parenting may also involve extended family networks. So involving, once again, that village, having our village be a part of this process, in the process of us raising our children. So of course, everything starts with those two adults, right? They come together first and foremost. And then in some situations, that village is very, very integral in helping us to come together and raise those children. So co-parenting is sometimes a difficult situation, right? It's not easy. Parenting is hard in general. It's very challenging at times to merge two different households and to come together to do what's best for your child. It is also greatly influenced by the reciprocal interactions of the parents involved. So basically, it has to be a two-way street. It does. Because if we think about co-parenting, so when we think of co, that means we're doing it, in combination with, in conjunction with someone else. So that interaction is a two-way street. We can't have one doing a part and not the other. So it's very important that if we think about, we want this parenting interaction to be positive, it really is influenced by how we interact with one another, that two-way street mentality. So if we have a situation, we want to think about what's best. And we know that there are things that one parent can do that maybe the other parent has to do something else. A very simple example may be, I'm able as a parent to drop the children off to school in the mornings. I say Monday through Friday, I can do drop off. I know now we're in a pandemic, so maybe the hybrid days I can do drop off, right? And so my co-parent, you are able to do pickup. So we've collaborated, we've coordinated, and we are making sure that we've come together and that we've come up with a plan. You do this part, I do that part, right? We're both doing a part. They're not one and the same, and that our interaction about that part is a positive interaction, that we're both doing something. It's reciprocal. It's a two-way street. So there are 3 types of co-parenting interactions. So we have the first one, parallel. In a parallel co-parenting interaction, the parents are disengaged from one another. They're active though in the parenting process. So it doesn't mean that like they're not co-parenting. They're just not engaged. They don't really, there's no communication. There's very little contact. So in these situations, for example, this may be a court order situation where the court has created or helped them to create this very, very specific plan. They follow it, they refer to it, and there's no other reason to interact. The contact is very, very small. And sometimes this is happening because there is so much conflict, and they've tried to talk to one another, and they've tried to communicate, and they can't get it together at that time, right? And I want to just focus on just I want to say at this time or at that time, because this does not have to be a dooming situation. Sometimes there's so much conflict that's unresolved that this is the way that they have to do it, because otherwise they would not be able to co-parent together at all. So you remember, the co-parenting is a journey, and this is how it starts. It is not the best dynamic for the child. It is absolutely not the best, because although there is minimal contact and minimal communication, that child is observing that, right? They're observing that contact, that minimal contact. They know mom and dad don't say anything to one another, right? So in a conflicted situation, we have high levels of disagreement, anger, and in this situation, there may be some unresolved relationship issues. So at some point, the parents had some type of possibly romantic relationship interaction. They were married, so they were spouses. They cohabitated. There was a partnership, right? A romantic partnership, probably, right? And then now we have transitioned and changed our roles, and then now we are just co-parents, and that transition is sometimes very difficult. So when there are a lot of unresolved issues about what the prior role was that the two of the parents had, and that relationship, and there's some residual stuff going on, that can sometimes cause high conflict if those things are not unresolved, right? We think of, even like it says, there may exist anger. Anger is a secondary emotion. It's important to tap into what is going on, what is underlying or over that anger. It's a secondary. So are you angry because you're really hurt? Are you angry because you're so frustrated and it's manifesting as anger? So it's a secondary emotion. So I wanted to mention that to say sometimes there's so much conflict because there's some unresolved things going on. So then we have a collaborative situation, which is the most ideal, which is the healthiest for the child. The first 2 are not the healthiest for children to witness. It is not the best situation. So the collaborative situation is the most desired. Both parents are willing to work together. There is some type of compromise on things related to the child and their welfare and their well-being. And here we go. Conflict may exist, but it's contained. There may be conflict, because remember, in relationships, we talked about this. Conflict happens, but it's knowing what to do with it. Like, what do I do? How to get through it? How to resolve it, right? How to agree to disagree. So this is the most ideal situation. And just because a relationship starts off, an interaction rather starts off conflicted, or there's a parallel dynamic, it doesn't mean that it can't transition through this journey to be a cooperative and collaborative situation, right? It does not mean that. So I just want to just put that out there. It's very, very important to note that there's a journey and things can get better, but that's the most ideal, and that is the healthiest for children. So, speaking of what's healthy for children, I want to talk a little bit more about how does co-parenting impact children? Because we talk about co-parenting in terms of what the two parents need to do in terms of each other, but we have to remember that we're talking about what they're doing in terms of one another in relation to the child or children. So we have a few ways here. So when we think about children being raised in homes, basically children who are witnessing positive parenting behaviors are less likely to be maladjusted. They have less adjustment issues. So I think about children sometimes starting off where the family unit is together. So maybe the parents are together and they separate. That child has to transition into this new dynamic, this new situation. And so they need to witness. And when I say witness, it's not meaning that someone's always sitting them down and saying, well, this is what this is. That is important, but also just absorbing their environment. They're paying attention, witnessing. When you're witnessing something, you're seeing it. You're seeing how this plays out. You're seeing how mom and dad are or whoever the partners are co-parenting. You're witnessing how they're interacting. You're witnessing if they may not talk to each other at all, right? If there's no contact, or if there's a conflict, how are they resolving it? So it's very important that we're understanding that kids are paying attention. So the next section says attention may be diverted from the needs of the children, right? So in a co-parenting situation that may not be the healthiest, I'm going to give you an example. Let's say every time you talk to your co-parent counterpart, you get into this heated disagreement and argument, and it takes all of your energy just to make the call because it has turned out to be a negative exchange in the past, and you feel anxious, you're filled with anxiety, you feel stressed, and so you get off the phone and it's high conflict, and then your child's right there. The child may not have heard the conversation, but they feel the energy. If you are full of anxiety, full of stress, that is going to divert the needs or away from the children or the child, right? That's going to divert attention away from what they're needing, because you got to tend to your emotions and what's going on with yourself first in order to be able to take care of them or tend to them. So when we're in this negative co-parenting dynamic, sometimes it takes it away from our children. Also, children are learning about interpersonal relationships from their parents. Parents are the very first teachers. Children do not, come out of the womb, right, and then go straight to school, right? They have their home environment is the school to start, right? So they're learning first and foremost about interpersonal interactions. They're learning that from parents. They're paying attention. Remember, they're witnessing. They're absorbing that in those walls of their home. They're seeing those things, and they're learning, how do I, when I get upset with someone, right? What do I do? When I don't like something, what do I do? When this person does something to me that's not favorable, what do I do? So they're learning about interpersonal relationships from their parents. How are you going to interact? The children are not, you're not in the home with the child and your co-parenting counterpart, but it's still very important that the child understands that your interpersonal relationships are important. And how do you problem solve? How do you resolve conflicts? So that last part is, when co-parents interact, how do they problem solve? There's going to be a problem. There's going to be a disagreement. You're going to want this for the child, but they want that for the child, right? Like, how is that going to be resolved? When you're interacting with one another, what are you choosing to do? That's a very important question to ask. So, co-parenting, I like this quote, is not a competition between two homes. It's a collaboration of parents doing what is best for the kids. I'm going to be very repetitive throughout this about co-parenting being about what's best for the kids. That's number one. I'm going to be very repetitive about it, and we're not competing at all. It's not a competition with our children. It's not about I'm a parent that is going to give the child more, or the child's going to love me more. I'm going to do this. You're not competing. You are coming together and you're collaborating, even when you just don't agree with the things that the person does or says. It's about what do we need to do for these children? What is best? What is best? That has to always be the question. Because it's the question because it's all about the children. It'll always be. Once those roles change, we talked about earlier, you may have transitioned from a romantic relationship, a dating relationship. You may have been spouses, cohabitating, right? Once the roles shifted and you've just solely become co-parent, it's not about those prior roles anymore. It's not about those things anymore. It is now about the children. So as long as you call yourself co-parents, it's all about the children, and it will always be. It won't be about that other dynamic. It'll be about the kids. So basically with co-parenting, both parents have to see the mutual value in the relationship. You have to see because you may ask yourself, you've decided that, like, let's say, for example, like you're not going to be with that person. So you're like, well, why do I have to talk to them? Why do I have to deal with this person who I chose for whatever the reasons to not be with? But you have a mutual value in that relationship, right? You have this investment that you only can work on this investment or add to this investment if you come together. It'll grow. If you can positively, right, come together in this co-parenting relationship and do what's best for your investment, which is your child. You're investing. That investment will grow tenfold, right? If you could put into it. So you have to come together, and you may not see the value in like being together romantically. Like that doesn't make sense for your life. But the mutual value in the relationship is this child or these children. We both value, and values are your own judgment about what's important. We may differ on so many different topics, and that's why we're not together. But the value in this dynamic, this relationship, this parenting relationship, we see the value. It's those children. It's all about the children, and it always will be. So I listed ways that parents interact with one another, how the children are impacted, and we don't want our children to be impacted negatively. So what gets in the way of positive co-parenting interactions? So one or both parents are unwilling and unable. So when I say unwilling and unable, I mean not compliant, right? Inflexible, right? Just just heavy conflict, and a lot of unresolved issues. A lot of unresolved issues, a lot of unresolved, and I say personal issues because it goes back to what I was saying about the roles changed and now you're co-parents. And sometimes because of those unresolved issues, we have a situation where you're not willing to like work with that person. And you're not willing to work with that person. It doesn't have anything to do with the child. It's just that person. That person, I am not willing. I'm unable to do it. Right now, I cannot do it. And so that makes for a situation where the positive co-parenting can't happen because you're not willing and you're just unable for whatever the reasons are. Then we have a situation where one or more parents are willing but unable. So when I think of a willing co-parent, it may be someone who desires in their heart to be a good parent. They desire to have that child get the best education. They want to make sure that they are safe, they're secure, they have their needs met, their child is getting love. They're willing, they want that, they desire that. That's in their heart. However, they're unable, right? And I'll give you examples of why they might be unable in this situation. They may lack skills to do so, to carry out the resources, right? They may lack the emotional and mental capacity. So think of us, I'll give you a couple of situations. Think about someone who is suffering from substance abuse disorder, right? Who willingly, right, wants the best. Like I'm willing to in my heart to be a good parent. I'm willing, I want it, but then I have this very intense issue, right? I have this issue that is making me at this time, and I underline at this time, it doesn't have to be a permanent condition, I'm unable to do so. I'm an incarcerated parent. I'm an incarcerated parent who has to co-parent. So think about that situation. I'm willing, I want to. If I wasn't incarcerated, if I wasn't here, I know I want the best for my child. I'm unable to do the school pickup, right? I'm unable to be present physically. I'm unable to do that. So now in those situations, for example, then we may have a strain on the other co-parent who now has to do the pickup, the drop off, who now has to be physically present at all times. So then that's those are examples of willing. I'm willing in my heart. I want my child to thrive. I want to work with you as a co-parent, but at this time, because of the situation at hand, I'm unable to do so. So that may cause a damper on a positive interaction. There is a strain there. It's challenging for one parent when that is the situation. There is unhealed hurt from the past. And I mentioned this multiple times as well. So a lot of times when we talked about the unwilling and unable, and I mentioned unresolved personal issues, this is what I'm referring to, that unhealed hurt from the past. And I want to validate people's feelings. Feelings are not a right or wrong thing. They just are. You feel something, and knowing you had an experience and you felt something from it, and someone can't tell you, that didn't happen or don't feel that way. It's not a light switch, right? But we want to make sure when we're thinking and talking about co-parenting, and we're talking about positive co-parenting, we want to make sure that we are those hurt, that pain, we want to figure out what do we need to do. But these things will get in the way of that. Because if I'm still hurt from what you did when we were in the relationship, or why the relationship ended, then it's going to be very, very challenging to work with you. Some people are able to compartmentalize. They're able to go, that was the relationship, that happened. I don't like what happened, but my child, and we just have to work together and collaborate, and I'm going to be cooperative. And some struggle to do so because the hurt is so immense. And even there's unforgiveness. So that unforgiveness, when we think about someone not forgiving, when you don't forgive, you are anchored in the past. You're over in the past, and it is hard to focus on what's right in front of you, right? And it doesn't mean, if we choose to forgive someone, if there's a hurt from a relationship that we had before we just transitioned to co-parents, if we're choosing to forgive, it doesn't absolve that person from the wrong. So remember, we're not saying, I forgive you, my fellow co-parent, and that means you didn't do anything to hurt me. That is not, it's not one and the same. But I think if we're shifting towards the idea of positive co-parenting, we need to make sure that we're aware if we're being, if we're hurt and we're unforgiving. If there's something that we can't move past that gets in the way of us collaborating with that person in the most positive way for the child. I'm always going to put that on the end, for the child or for the children. Grief occurs. So there's grief. So sometimes what is getting in the way of the positive co-parenting interaction is that there's loss. There is loss, and we're not, of course, talking about the grief that's related to death. We're talking about the loss of a relationship. If the two parents were married, they're divorced now, there is that sense of loss, that grief of what was, of what could have been. We're grieving, right? We're grieving. We may still have those feelings of, those immense feelings of love that we don't know what to do with now. We can't give it to that person. We're not together. So there's grief. There's also a level of disappointment, because I don't know that many people set out to have children and then to just transition just to co-parents. Not that this does not happen, right? I don't want to generalize, but there may be a level of disappointment because maybe you didn't set out to be in this situation where you didn't want conflict. You didn't set out to have your child not raised in a home with two parents. So there's disappointment that occurs because maybe this isn't the situation that you didn't want. And then we think about how, as Black people, we are often stigmatized, right? So when there are single parent homes, there's stigma about that. There is stigma about the absent Black father, that we don't want to have that, like, play out in our situation and have people look at our situation in that light, because it's inaccurate. It's an inaccurate stigma, right? So there's a disappointment because of also how we're seen often that's not accurate about our story. So there's that feeling that we have, and these feelings sometimes get in the way. So now let's talk about the essential steps to co-parenting. Very important. So, of course, we're going to talk about these steps, and there's a number one goal. And I know I've repeated often how families are different. There's different members, there's different situations, but ultimately our goals are the same when it comes to, our number one goal is the same when it comes to co-parenting, positive co-parenting. And the number one goal, and I know you know the answer because I've been repetitive enough today. I know I have. The number one goal is a healthy, well-adjusted child. And when I say healthy, all aspects of health. We want children who thrive. We want to give them the best start possible. That is the number one goal. When you're co-parenting, there's so many other goals there. You could want your child to have to go to an Ivy League college one day, and you could want them to, you can do all of the things that you can so that you can prepare them. They can be a doctor, and you want them to live in this place. We're not talking about those things. Those things may differ per family, but we're specifically talking about health and well-being, being well-adjusted, right? And just like I said, being overall just a child who can thrive. So that is the goal of co-parents. You want to come together so that you're on mission. You're on the same mission. You have a mutual value in that relationship to make that happen the best way that you know how. Next, we are not wanting to talk badly about the person that we're co-parenting with. Don't talk about the other parent to your child or children. And I want to give you two examples because it looks different. So we don't want to say, mom is stupid. Like, that was really stupid, that choice that she made. Like, your mom she does stupid things. That's example one, right? That is overt. That's blatant. Mom was called stupid. That is disparaging mom's character, who she is, right? We know that. This is the other example. Oh, you're taking so long to do that. Like, you are so slow, just like your father. He takes forever to do everything. You're just so slow like him. So now we're comparing, and we're negatively comparing. That's the second example. Not as overt. So because utilizing the word slow, but we're not saying it in a positive. That's light. That's not a positive comment. That's still disparaging the child's father, right? That is making a comparison. That's not a positive comparison, right? So we just want to make sure we don't do that. That we're not talking badly, right? The child loves their parent. They love that whoever the parents are, a child loves their parents. So although you may see that parent in a light where the relationship, they did things in the relationship that you didn't like, or little characteristics about them, your child knows that they love their parent. In the story. Anything they need to learn about your co-parenting counterpart, they're gonna learn. They're going to learn on their own. You don't have to say anything. They're going to learn and make a decision for themselves about what type of relationship as they get older. They'll learn. It is not up to us as co-parents to say anything negative or talk badly. And we put our child in a bad situation. We put them in the middle, and they don't need to be in the middle. The only way they need to be in the middle is to look at them as the center of the relationship, as to why we're together talking about this conversation today. Is that child's in the middle of us coming together to make a decision that's best for them. They're in the middle in that way. That we look right in the middle. They're there. Let's look at them. And when we think about we're about to have this conflict, we're about to disagree, we got to go, what's best for that child? That's right in the middle. Okay. Not in the middle in that way where we're, saying negative things. And so another thing I want to add to that is to make sure that we are, and this ties into this point, we want to make sure that we're not also communicating through the child. So we don't want to say negative things about the parent, the co-parent, but we don't want to pass messages through. Tell your mother that, tell your father that I said, or we don't want to put our child in the middle in that way either. So that leads to the next part, which is communicate effectively, right? And with your number one goal in mind. So when you're about to communicate, and I'm drilling this in, the number one goal part, what's your number one goal? The child, the well-being. I want you to refer to that first. Like, I'm about to get into this disagreement, but what's my number one goal? Right? To repeat it over and over again. I want to tell this person, how I feel about this, and my emotions are heightened, but what's my number one goal? So communicating effectively and remembering that the number one goal is the health and well-being and what's best for that child or children, right? So important. Being self-aware. So every time I have a conversation with you, I am going to talk about self-awareness. So when we talked about conflict last time, I mentioned self-awareness. I mentioned looking within or at ourselves. It is a very, very easy to see what someone else is doing wrong, what's missing, what's their part. I think it's very important to do our part and to do our own work, because we only have control over our part. We would like to influence others, but and I think we can in ways, but I think it ultimately comes down to us and being aware. So if I'm desiring for this healthy co-parenting dynamic, these positive interactions, then I on my end have to make sure that that's what I'm doing too. I have to make sure that I'm providing or offering what I'm wanting as well. So being very self-aware, understanding, am I responding to this person, this co-parent of mine, because there are unresolved issues? Am I responding this way because of the unresolved issues? Am I responding to them because of past trauma? Is this a trauma cue, right? Is my interaction with this person a trauma cue? Is it triggering something? Are there, because of how we're interacting, is this triggering childhood issues that I had? Am I thinking about this dynamic with my co-parenting partner, and does it make me think of how I was raised? what my situation was with my parents, my, my dad, my mom, right? Whoever raised me, is it doing that? So I just want to be self-aware to make sure that those things are not getting in the way of me parenting with my co-parenting counterpart as positively as possible. So I want to be aware of me and figure out what I need to do. What do I need to do to make sure that I do my part, that I am doing my part to the best of my ability? And it's not about putting blame. It's not about me saying that it's you, right? It's about us just looking within ourselves, right? That's where any change starts, right? It starts within ourselves. Then we're making sure that we are, because a few slides back we said this is not easy. It's a lot of work. The co-parenting journey is a journey, right? It takes time. Our children are, they get older. So the needs, if you are co-parenting and the child's 7, then maybe it's going to look different when they're 15, right? You're coming together with a new type of agreement or decision making because the child's needs change. And so if there's work and there's a journey, and you're not going to like everything that the person does, or like you're not going to agree, there is going to be conflict. It's going to take some of your energy. It's going to take your time. So if we want to make sure that we're coming together and we're co-parenting positively, we have to make sure we're taking care of us. We're not being selfish. We are practicing self-care. So we're making sure that our oxygen mask is on first, right? Think about that analogy, the airplane. Just the idea of the oxygen mask coming down, you're covering yours, and then you can help others. So when I'm self-aware and I'm taking care of myself so I could recharge, so that I could self-reflect on what I'm doing, what do I need to do for myself, so that when I'm parenting, especially when I'm parenting with someone else that is not within my home, that I'm doing it to the best of my ability, but I'm making sure that I'm taking care of myself. I do it best. You can do it best, right? You're saying this to yourself. I can do it best when I'm healthy and well. So we don't also want to assume, or we don't want to jump to conclusions, right? We don't want to. Now, in terms of assuming the negative or jumping to conclusions, I know that in situations there's a prior history that may cause you to jump to those conclusions or think negative. If you've had experiences with that person that you're co-parenting with that have been similar in the past, and so like you don't call yourself jumping to conclusions, you just say this always happens in your mind, right? But we just want to think the best as much as we can, right? Because the core, the center of it all is the well-being of the child. So we want to make sure that we just aren't, we're not assuming as much as possible, jumping to conclusions. We're communicating effectively, getting the right amount of information. And if we say that the goal is for our children to be healthy, well-adjusted, and we just want to make sure that we're communicating the best way that we know how. We want to also model communication, right? And just not assume, right? And just, if it's something that you have to communicate that's about the health, the well-being and safety of that child, it's important that you do so. We don't want to make any assumptions. We want to gather the information, and we want to put their safety as number one. So we don't want to assume something. We want to know something. We want to know so that like we can operate in the best interest of that child or those children. Now we have creating a parenting plan. So a parenting plan, I think, it's just really important, and I think it's something that you can use, and it'll help kind of streamline things and just kind of make things just more organized in the process in our co-parenting journey. So a parenting plan is a personalized plan with a goal of just meeting the needs of the child or children and keeping parents on the same page, right? So when the court system is involved, they may, There may be a custody agreement that's lined out, right? Documented. When I'm saying this, I'm talking about it doesn't have to be a court involved situation. I'm just saying a plan. We want to make sure our children have everything they're needing, that we know we're in different households, but we just want to we want to be in lockstep. It's that pact, it's the agreement, right? For positive co-parenting. We are in agreement that we want to make this pact. We're in this, to make sure this child has what they need. So we need to be on the same page. We need a plan, and we need to map this all out. There should be no surprises. I want you to know what's going on. I want to know what's going on as co-parents. So what's in our plan? So we may have specific custody arrangements in the plan, right? Like, or scheduling, and knowing who's with the children, what days, who's doing pickup, what time. So that might be something that needs to be concrete, right? So in a plan, we basically want to have it where it can be referred to or accessed, right? So we want it to be, and there's so many types of ways to do this. So when we think of a parenting plan, there are several apps that can be used. If you are someone who is techie, who likes tech, who likes to use apps, and you go by your phone, then that might be a great way. There are some great apps that streamline all of the information, schedules and everything. Some people opt to have a Google document, right? Google documents, you don't have to save them. They're live documents. They're ever changing. You can add to it, take away from it. So it's whatever works for you and your family. And I'm using family now, and I'm saying your family in this situation, you, your child, and your co-parenting partner, and the village, if the village is needed, right? In terms of scheduling, because maybe the village is involved in the pickups, the drop-offs, the tutoring, So that's what is important. It's about what works, with the child's focus, focusing on the child with that in mind, and their well-being. So that's what's in your plan. You can utilize anything that you want, any method, any tool, as long as it's a plan, as long as there's information that's shared. So in your plans also, it's going to be medical and healthcare information. So let's say, for example, you are with your children over the weekend, right? And you're not, maybe you're not Monday through Friday, they're at the other parent's home. So like they get sick over the weekend, and you have to take them to emergent care, or urgent care rather. And you don't have their insurance information. You don't have their insurance card. You don't, they ask what the primary care physician is, and you don't know. It doesn't matter how many days the child is at parent A and then how many days they're at parent B. Their healthcare and medical information has to be shared. So it's about the sharing of information, the plan of action. If the child, if your daughter gets sick, you're like knowing that this is where she goes, where I traditionally take her. If she has a bad toothache and really needs to go to the dentist, and it's an emergency visit, this is the dentist's office. That's in your plan. That information, sharing it. If the child goes to a therapist, right? Planning on how are we sharing information, right? How are we letting the other parent know of the progress of what's going on in the plan? Education and extracurricular activities. So we have school, there's report cards, right? Academic reports. Some schools will, in situations, allow you to have both parents receive information. They have both parents' information on file. They will mail report cards to both homes. But you need to decide what works best. Are you, as parent A, electronically sending report cards over to parent B, right? Are you deciding on how extracurricular activities are going to go? Who's going to take the child, pick them up? What activities will be best for, long term for them in terms of their future. And, everything you're discussing, you're communicating about that, that's in your plan. Or just information sharing. And I think it's just so important that the parents just be on the same page. And that's what the plan really is about. Like the same page. There's no surprises. You know what's going on. I know what's going on. Childcare, right? If they're not school age, who's going to watch them? Who's going to be their care while parents are at work, right? If they go to school but parents are not off of work until a certain time, what's the child care plan then? So just like, having that mapped out, where do they go? What's the address of the place? What's the telephone number? That information is important. Financial obligations. They're going to childcare. It's not free. Who's paying for it, right? Who's paying? They need braces. How's that going to go? Is the insurance going to cover it? Is there a copay? Who's paying that, right? Just having those things mapped out so that it's not a surprise. You ironed it out. You're on the same page. So just want to let you know, I think this is so important to note. It is okay to get support through this process of co-parenting. So we want to do it positively, but we want to make sure that we are getting support in the process because it is not easy. Remember, it's a journey and repeating, being repetitive here. So if you're a parent, I'm talking about one parent, whether, you're parent A, parent B, you are a parent and those unresolved relationship issues I talked about earlier, right? I told you, it's important to be self-aware and self-reflect. You do that process, you think about it, you realize that there's some unresolved things going on and that you're willing and you're able to, you want to be the best parent. You want to co-parent effectively and positively, but there's those unresolved issues. What I'm recommending is that you seek support. It is okay on your own for you to seek out therapy, to find someone that will help you sort through the situation, sort through the unresolved issues, sort through if there's childhood issues or trauma that you're dealing with that may be impacted by your relationship dynamic with your co-parent, right? When you interact with them, it triggers something in you. When you interact with them, you have a hard time because of what happened in the relationship, and you just may need to sort that out. So after you have self-reflected, you may realize, I need help sorting through this. I want a healthy child that has both parents. So this is something I need to do for me. It's that self-care. This is a part of self-care. Therapy, counseling, a part of self-care, taking care of your emotional and mental needs. That might be a key component to you being able to co-parent with your co-parenting counterpart. Also, in terms of support, there are co-parenting counselors. The two of you can come together. Remember, you're not coming together so that you can figure out how do you get back together romantically. You're coming together because you might need someone to help mediate, to figure out, how do we communicate? How are we communicating? And we're communicating this way, and it's really just not working. We want to do better, but how I'm communicating, it's just not working. How she's communicating, it's just not working. So we need someone to help support us in that situation. So coming together and getting co-parenting counseling. It is out there. It is available. You can have the time to do that. You could sort through some feelings that you need to sort through. But the goal, of course, is how do we effectively communicate? How do we effectively work together so that we could be the best parents? Because remember, it's just always going to be about the children. So I want you to understand just the importance of just getting support. And it may be support from family and friends, and not in the way where someone's telling you what to do, because someone can't tell you what to do in the situation because you're in the situation and no one knows what to do in your situation. They may be able to have a similar experience, but just getting support, remembering that village that we talked about earlier, about those extended family networks that are integral in the process sometimes, right? And making it work. If you have now become a single parent, and so now there's challenges within that, like reaching out to your extended network as a support system. It is always okay to get help. Help doesn't mean you're not independent, you can't do this, you're not parenting correctly. It doesn't mean that. Support is support and we all need it. So just remembering just the importance of doing so and looking at it from that standpoint. So now we're at one of my favorite parts of our time together. It's reflection activity time. Okay, so this is what we're going to do for our reflection activity for our co-parenting conversation. So I'm going to give you some prompts. So I want you to have your journals and something to write with, and I'm going to give you a series of questions. So once again, when I talked for these past few minutes, I talked about that self-awareness. So this activity for co-parenting is going to just involve you. It's going to involve you and your personal reflection, right? Because a co-parenting situation has two people, right? So like your co-parenting partner can't work on you and you can't work on them. You can only work on your part, right? So we want to be our best selves so we can collaborate in the best way. So here we go. So our first question, what are your strengths as a parent? What do you struggle with? We all struggle. And it's okay. Just like I said earlier, it's okay to get support. It's okay to struggle. We all struggle at some point. What are ways that you cope with the challenges of parenting and life in general? Like, how do you cope with it? What kind of parent do you want to be? Right? So, what we're going to do now is we're going to, like I said, have your journals out, be prepared for this activity. But what we're going to do now is hear an example. So, when I gave you these prompts, I wanted to just show you, I wrote the answers out and I just want you to hear how I would answer these questions if I was writing in my journal, because I love modeling, right? I love modeling these activities. So, what are your strengths as a parent? First, I love my children and want the best for them. I support them and encourage them daily. I'm funny and enjoy laughing with them. I discipline them and make sure that they are learning from their experiences. Our next question, what do you struggle with? I struggle with guilt. The pandemic has stretched me. And I know some of you parents can relate to this, right? And working from home doesn't allow me to separate my two worlds. When my door is closed and I'm working, I sometimes feel a sense of guilt and that I'm not providing enough time to them. Our next question, what are ways that you cope with the challenges of parenting in life? I remind myself that it is okay to make mistakes as a parent. Parenting does not equal perfection. I make sure to take time to myself daily to recharge. One way is by getting up very early for quiet time. I love quiet time. When my kids then get up, I feel energized and ready to meet their needs. Last question. What kind of parent do you want to be? Remembering parenting is a journey. Co-parenting is a journey. So I need to look at like where I want to get to. I haven't arrived. I'm working every day towards it. So how I answer this question? I want to be a parent that is understanding and loving. I want to respect my children and nurture their abilities to express who they are. I want to parent with their father cooperatively and collaboratively. I want to give them a village and encourage the idea of loving family and friends and teachers and community members, and that these people are integral in their development. So I want to just have that idea set forth, and I want to be a parent that encourages that. So these are the answers to how I answered the prompts. And once again, this is a prompt for a personal reflection that looks at how we want to be as parents, right? It starts with us. And I think it's very, very important to see it from that standpoint. So um, I want you to enjoy the reflection activity. Take your time, think about it, reflect, and enjoy doing it. So that is our time today as we today discussed positive co-parenting steps. I hope that the information and the resources were beneficial to you. I hope you extend this conversation with others. I hope that you are inspired in some way to do something, or if you are already doing some of these things, these steps, I commend you. Keep going, don't stop. And so as always, be well, take care of yourself, and take care of each other. Until next time, bye bye.